Welcome into episode 365 of the Skate Podcast. I'm Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. Bridget and Scott, before we begin today's episode, just a friendly reminder that Friday on our next episode, we'll be conducting a mailbag. So we've already been receiving questions from you guys, but just again, where you can send us said questions is skatepod@weei.com. You can tweet us at the Skate Pod. You can tweet at Scott. You can tweet at Bridget, tweet at myself, comment on YouTube. We'll collect all the questions and we will answer as many as we can on Friday.
I wanted to answer some today and Scott said no. So
Well, you pitched that idea like 30 seconds before we started recording.
No, I didn't.
I had not prepared answers.
Oh, I did. I mean, there were some that related to what we're going to talk about, but either way, Scott poo-pooed it, so
I think they'll all still be relevant because this Bruins season keeps just like going in the same cycle, and that can lead right into my opening shift, which is that I think this team has ADD. They just cannot stay focused on the task at hand. They start to turn a corner over the weekend. They make some progress. I know it was two bad teams, but they played good hockey. Not great, as we said in the last pod. There were stretches in both games where they took their foot off the gas too much, but it was a step in the right direction. Great chance to keep it going. Tuesday night in Toronto against a rival team you just beat last time you played them. And they just immediately go back to all those same mistakes. They just immediately get sidetracked. They lose their focus. They can't do it for a third straight game. They take way too many penalties, which is just the best sign of a lack of focus and attention to detail. They couldn't kill them, which I know is part of Brian's opening shift. Got nothing going at 5-on-5. Once again, looked like a team that didn't have chemistry after a weekend where it looked like they were finding some combinations that worked. Sloppy play in their own zone that led to both penalties and scoring chances. It's I'm at a loss for words to try to explain it, which is why I just went with the ADD thing, because it's I don't know why this team keeps doing this. For a while, it was one good game followed by two or three bad ones. They finally strung together two good games in a row, and then they immediately answer it with just an absolute dud up in Toronto.
Yeah, I mean, they've been shut out 3 times, and they have 2 shutouts in the last 2 weeks. I don't know. They're up and down for sure. So I guess that's where your opening take comes from. Mine has to do with an addition for the Bruins and what else it affects in the Bruins lineup, because Tyler Johnson finally, after about a month, ends up signing a contract with Boston, a cap hit of $775,000, 1-year deal. He's 34, by the way, and he came in and played his first game of the season against Toronto. So we can get into later on what you think he can bring. But in terms of how he changes the makeup of this team, I think maybe Morgan Geekie has a little bit to be worried about, because Morgan Geekie's the guy that ends up out of the lineup. Tyler Johnson plugged in, and Morgan Geekie has maybe not been playing well enough to keep his spot in the lineup. So maybe this competition can help get him going for the spot, because it seems like Brezzo is doing enough to stay in the lineup where he is, and the fourth line as well. So it'll be interesting to see how Johnson signing affects some of the, I will say, third liners, because that kind of seems like where he's most likely going to fit in for most of the season. And if it affects the power play units at all, because he does get a little bit of time on the power play, and pretty much every practice that he's been, he practices on the power play for certain units. So it'll just be interesting to see how this changes the team. Now, does it help them offensively at all? Does he bring that? Remains to be seen, but at least he's a veteran player, doesn't cost you a lot, and he's an option for you now.
Well,
Yeah.
and quickly, the one guy we know it definitely affected is Max Jones because he's gone. He got waived. We'll find out at 2 p.m. Wednesday whether he cleared waivers and will go to Providence or if another team claimed him.
Yeah, so that means Tufty and Max Jones both didn't work out at this point. Tufty got waived but cleared waivers and is in Providence. Maybe the same thing happens to Max Jones, but that is why we have Tyler Johnson joining the team now.
Yeah, no, and Scott mentions the domino effect that took place for Max Jones. We'll definitely get into Tyler Johnson and what we could possibly expect that he can bring based on some of his recent seasons and just the totality of his career. But just to kind of take a step back and a quick snapshot of what did transpire on Tuesday night. So for those who watched the game, you obviously know. For those maybe that were busy, like Bruins lose 4-0 to Toronto. It's their first regulation loss to the Maple Leafs, I believe, in 9 games. They had an 8-game regular season win streak, I should say, against Toronto. Bridget touched on it briefly. Boston goes. They gave up. They get shut out for the 3rd time this year. 3rd time in 14 games. I think I saw Ty Anderson say it was the 3rd time in the last 8 games, if you really want to break it down. And for the 4th time this season, the Bruins give up 3 power play goals in the game. And that is really where I want to start, because there's the inconsistency that Scott referred to is evident, and there's plenty to break down across the lineup, special teams, and of course at even strength. But I do just want to highlight the undisciplined play continuing in Toronto, offensive zone penalties, behind the play penalties, and the penalty kill not being able to get the job done. We've talked about it in recent episodes. You're not, especially when you're not in a groove offensively as a team, you cannot be going 3 for 7 on the penalty kill in a game, let alone four games this year, in not even a full calendar month since the regular season started, that you've given up 3 power play goals against in a game. So special teams killed them again last night on both sides, power play and penalty kill, over 6 in the power play. And that's my opening shift, is the special teams. A lot of their game is letting them down. Even strength is no different. But in today's NHL, special teams is such a major component, and their special teams it's been hurting them all year so far. Last night was no different.
Yeah, and I kind of mentioned to how they didn't generate anything 5-on-5 either. They didn't really give up anything 5-on-5. 5-on-5 was a draw. This wasn't really a 5-on-5 game. It was a special teams game. Toronto had 7 power plays. Boston had 6. Toronto scores on 3. Boston scores on 0. There's your game. If you're going to lose the special teams battle, then you have to decisively win 5-on-5. And Bruins didn't do either. Losing special teams and breaking even 5-on-5, not going to cut it. Just the sheer number of penalties it's honestly astonishing that they now have 79 penalties taken through 14 games. That is 12 more than any other team. They have given opponents 5 or more power plays in more than half of their games. In 8 out of 14 games, their opponent has had 5 or more power plays. That is just way too many. I heard, I think Billy Jaffe put it correctly during one of the intermissions, where he said, if you give opponents 1 power play period, that's probably fine. 3 a game, you're probably in okay shape. Ideally, you have a bunch of games where you're under that, but you can survive that. You get up to 5 or 6 a game, it's just too much. You just cannot be shorthanded that much. And Toronto's 3 power play goals, it's not like the Bruins got gashed where they made these massive mistakes. A couple of them are just tips in front. One goes off a body, a pass to the front goes off a body. But it's the more you put the opponent on the power play, the more you're going to give up those goals, because you just can't do it 5, 6, 7 times a game. You're just asking too much, trotting your penalty killers out there over and over again. I mean, the stretch in the second period where Zadorov goes to the box for interference. They give up a power play goal. Very next shift, Pasternak, or maybe it's just 2 shifts later, Pasternak, high stick in the offensive zone. Toronto scores again on the power play. Very next shift after that, Charlie McAvoy hooking penalty. And that's basically the game. It's 2-0. It's a game where the Bruins already weren't generating, and it's like you just can't have it. They just keep killing themselves over and over again. And I don't know how they get this to stop. It seems so. We're just gonna scream till we're blue in the face, stop taking penalties, and yet this team can't do it.
Yeah, and by the way, Toronto scores 3 power play goals. Their power play was not good in the early parts of the season,
and didn't have Austin Matthews, by the way.
No,
which we
they
haven't
didn't have
mentioned
Austin
yet.
Matthews. They, I think they came into the game with 5 power play goals total on the season, and they were right towards the bottom. They're still 26 in the league in power play percentage. But that wasn't a hot power play that it was going to score 3 goals on anyone. It's not the same Toronto power play that you're remembering, because first of all, Austin Matthews wasn't there, and it just hasn't been clicking this year. But of course, the Bruins power play is even worse. It's 29th in the league, so numbers aren't great. You're not scoring on the power play when you get them, and you're, believe it or not, the penalty kill is still somewhere in the middle of the pack. But yeah, it just hasn't looked good. But you can't keep putting yourself shorthanded the way that they have been. So.
But they're in the middle of the pack because Scott mentioned that they've taken 1 million penalties. So there's going to be just a matter of, opponents not executing or Bruins having some good PKs, but it's a volume thing there. But,
even that, they're down to 20th now in penalty kill percentage.
Yeah. Okay.
And you're talking about a team that's top 5, at least top 10 almost every year. So the penalty killing obviously isn't good enough, and I think part of it is how much they're having to kill. You're just asking too much of that group.
Yeah, and you're draining, you're screwing with your bench, because you have set penalty killers, so your lines are getting out of sync as it pertains to a regular shift. Your defense, your PK forwards, they're getting drained, so they have a little bit less for their even strength shifts or their power play shifts. It's just a bad recipe. It's poor game management by the players to be taking such undisciplined penalties all the time. And I want to ask you guys a quick question, because I think the Bruins could learn something from last night. Scott, you mentioned that the Maple Leafs power play goals, they were shots from distance and pinballs. And I want to ask you guys, even without Austin Matthews in the lineup, which team had more talent to put out on a power play?
I feel like probably fairly even.
Fairly
I don't
even.
know. I don't know what answer you're looking for, but I think fairly even.
Fairly even, maybe itching towards Toronto. My point is, even without Austin Matthews, the Maple Leafs still possess a lot of talent on their power play. They have Mitch Marner, William Nylander, Morgan Riley, Matthew Nyes. I mean, honestly, right then and there, I would say that's probably more than maybe just Pasternak and Marchand. I mean, McAvoy, we know. I'm kind of deviating from my point. The point I'm trying to illustrate is that even with the talent that Toronto had last night, they still there's shots from distance. You sit there and you say, well, those shouldn't go in. But you know what? Good things happen when you put pucks to the net. Like Morgan Riley, he just puts a shot on net from not a back slapping, slap shot, just a quick wrist shot, snapshot. Nyes may have screened Swayman a little bit. I don't love that goal, but there was a bit of a screen. Can hope for a little bit more box out from Carlo there, but it's a shot from distance. Nylander, a very skilled player from the corner, just throws it towards the net, hoping that something like that happens. And their final goal, Nylander at the top of or their final power play goal, Nylander at the top of the blue line, a very, very non-threatening wrist shot ordinarily, but he gets it through, and it gets tipped. And my point is, the Bruins seem to be just way too picky with their shot selection on the power play. Now, they had some chances on their power play last night, but just in general, it's that simplistic mindset that you need to have with the extra man on the ice of just get it to the net, funnel pucks to the net, and retrieve rebounds and just cause chaos. You're not going to have these power plays all the time where it's a tic-tac-toe, Marchand to McAvoy to Pasternak, one-timer in. It's like those happen once in the blue moon. Most power play goals by most teams are believe it or not, just results of simple plays, high percentage plays.
Yeah, and like oddly enough, that's been an issue that Morgan Riley has been criticized for, just like McAvoy. I think Brick mentioned that during the broadcast, was saying, people in Toronto are saying like Morgan Riley should be taken off the top power play unit because he's not shooting enough. And it's like, wow, that sounds exactly like the conversations we have about Charlie McAvoy. But Riley did it, and it led to that goal. And then as you said, when Nylander was up high, he did it. I actually thought the Bruins did more of that with their own power plays. Like that, they did get 12 shots on goal, which is pretty good. Some of them weren't as dangerous as you would like, but my bigger problem with the Bruins power play was just how sloppy it still got at times. Like once they got set up, I thought they had a little bit more of a shot mentality than they've had at other times this year, but they gave away a couple shorthanded chances, and they ended 2 of their power plays early by taking penalties. And one of them, it's like right off the offensive zone face-off. McAvoy, like the puck kind of just squirts free, and McAvoy kind of like reaches out and tries to handle it instead of just whacking it to the corner and like creating a battle. And, obviously just loses it. Marner just about to take off the other way, and McAvoy has to take him down. But yeah, like it looks, those are the goals like the Bruins just don't seem to be scoring the power play right now. Like the ones that just look simple and easy, where you're just throwing it to the net. And it's like, I feel like earlier this season, there were times where they did that, whether it was McAvoy scoring right off a faceoff with a shot at one point, or, Hampus Lindholm had the goal called back where he shot right off a faceoff win. For whatever reason, they just don't do it consistently enough. And they keep reverting back to like passing around and, like you said, kind of looking for the perfect play too often.
Now, is that coaching? Is that players thinking too much about where their coaches are telling them to be in different situations on the man advantage, where they're being told, guys, we need, you're on the power play, find the 2-on-1, find the high percentage or high danger look? Or is it the players just, maybe going against some of the coach's wishes? We don't really know that answer, but I mean, a very evident coaching element that you see in the power play is their zone entries, right? Like a zone entry is, you can tell the players are following orders more or less. When you get in the offensive zone, there's a little bit more creativity, I think, more creative freedom, generally speaking, from the coaching staff. But the coaches probably have their fingerprints all over the zone entries. And it looks like an adjustment they made last night in Toronto. They're still doing that drop back pass, but it appeared that they were trying to give maybe Elias Lindholm that drop back, in addition to Pasternak at times. Maybe Lindholm comes with more straight ahead speed. So that appeared to be an adjustment. But their power play struggles, do you think they're quote unquote obeying coach's orders, or do you think the players are being stubborn?
I think that they're just at times in the 2 wins they look better, but it just seems like they're not moving enough, which I think is on the players, because obviously I don't think coach is sitting there saying like stay still and stagnant on the power play.
Yeah, but so I mentioned this before, but I do think not that Montgomery's telling him to stay still, but I do think he doesn't put an emphasis on player movement. Like we've heard that from him before, where he said, like, I think puck movement is more important than player movement. And it's like, like that meme with the kid, like, why not both? Like, why can't you do both?
Well,
And
you can't have one without the other, to your point, Scott.
right. And at times it feels like that's what they're trying to do, where it's like, I think Montgomery puts a lot of emphasis on quick passing, crisp passing. And so that becomes the emphasis in the players' minds, and they forget about moving themselves around, because I don't know if that's being driven home as often. Like, I think they're hearing about quick puck movement a lot, and I don't know that Montgomery emphasizes guys moving around and rotating and popping up in different spots. And I think you should. Like, I think we're on year 2 now of this power play looking stagnant far too often.
Yeah, like moving without when you don't have the puck. Seems like they could be doing that a lot better. And yeah, if that is the game plan by coaching, then it's not working and it hasn't worked. Last season, it was one of the main talking points heading into the playoffs is can the power play get better? And it just continues.
Well, in particular, like the Bruins have had, Scott mentioned the Bruins always having a top 5 penalty kill. They've always had a top 5, top 10 at least power play, I would say, in the last, decade or so. Like when the Bruins had Pasternak and and Marchand on a unit with, Bergeron and Krug, and then insert your 5th player there, whether it's DeBrusque or somebody else. Like they always had puck movement, but more importantly, they had puck movement because they were moving without the puck. And so Martian and Pasternak were a part of that. I don't think they just forgot like that leads to success. And I don't think just inserting McAvoy instead of Krug, you know, makes them like I think there's been a philosophical change because we've seen the Bruins power play for years be successful. And a lot of that starts with in zone face-off wins, which is something on the power play that has been alleviating them. It's not been a strength of theirs. They've been losing a lot of draws in the offensive zone on power plays, and it's just getting iced right down. And that just kills 25 seconds. More importantly, it kills confidence and momentum. So that's a problem too. But you can't tell me that Pasternak and Marchand aren't capable of having a successful power play. I've seen it for a decade with those two.
Yeah, and I mean, they have to try some other stuff and they have to figure it out. Like they're now down to 29th in the league. Like that is 13.3% on the season. It's like it's not just bad. It's not just not good enough. Like it's awful. Like that is legitimately the territory of bad teams.
Yeah, I mean
And
you
you
got
just you have too much talent. You have too much talent to be one of the worst. Like maybe you're middle of the pack. Maybe that's their ceiling. But you have way too much talent to be one of the absolute worst in the whole league.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much every coach will tell you if you're not about right about 20% or higher, then you're doing something wrong. And obviously, 13% not a good number to have on the power play. And I guess maybe this could tie into my opening shift. Is Tyler Johnson someone that you can plug in on the power play? He seems to be comfortable there. He was taking power play shifts in the preseason games that he was in, and you see him kind of hunting pucks down near the net. He has he has a good instinct for picking up rebounds and where he needs to be down low in the zone. But do you guys think that plugging him in on the power play could at least give it a little bit of a different look? And it's probably not on the first unit, but he could be a second unit guy.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, they used him there last night on that left elbow on the second unit. Yeah, I mean, more than half of his points last year in Chicago were on the power play. He's been a power play guy his whole career, so yeah, I'm sure he can help the second unit. Like you said, I don't know that the bigger problem is the Bruins have to fix their first unit, and I don't know where he would go on that unit because he generally plays the same spot as Pasternak, so that's not changing. I think in the preseason, if I remember correctly, they used him in the bumper a little bit, but that's where they've had Elias Lindholm, unless maybe you change it where Lindholm moves more to a net front role, which he's also played, and can Tyler Johnson be bumper on your top unit? I'm open to trying anything because what they're doing right now isn't working. So, yeah, maybe we see that look at some point.
Yeah, and I just don't. There's definitely elements he can help out with, but again, and Scott mentioned his success on the power play in Chicago, but again, like a lot of Boston's issues are, it's pace, it's zone entry. I think it's philosophy. So it's almost like Yeah, it's I don't know. I don't think he hurts them. I don't think he hurts them, but I don't know if he is this savior. But I do want to talk about Tyler Johnson quickly because Bridget, you brought him up, and just a couple of things that for those who just might think he's washed, knew about him in Tampa Bay, lost track of him the last couple of years. Why they take a flyer on him. Now I just want to preface this. Scott did mention that again, a lot of his production in Chicago came not at even strength. Okay, but nonetheless, the Bruins can use help wherever they can get it right now. So, two-time Stanley Cup champion, and I really do think that he can provide some leadership, some veteran leadership that the Bruins low key kind of lost last year with Kevin Shattenkirk going, JVR going, and Pat Maroon, who you got for the tail end of the season. He also left as well. But in 2022, 2023, Johnson had 12 goals, 20 assists, 32 points in 56 games. That's an 82 game pace of 18 goals, 29 assists, 47 points. Last year, he had 17 goals, 14 assists, 31 points in 67 games. That's an 82 game pace of 21 goals, 17 assists, and 38 points. So obviously, he's not playing a full 82 games this year. He just got signed, but I think you can probably optimistically expect him to maybe be 25 to 30 points, maybe if he finds a groove. And I don't see how that's much different than some of the expectations we have for the rest of their middle six. So he should be a semi-productive middle six guy that can bring you some intangibles.
Yeah, and obviously they're gonna, probably move him around a little and try to find exactly where he fits in. Game one, we saw him with Potter and Trent Frederick on the third line. Again, there just wasn't a ton of 5-on-5 time in this game, so I think every line sort of got thrown off in terms of just not being able to find a rhythm between all the penalties. So I don't know that we really learned a whole lot in game one. Like, I'll be honest, like I only noticed Johnson because I was trying to watch for him to see how he looked. I don't think he really made much of an impact, good or bad. But it's game one after not playing since the preseason. Like, of course, there's going to be some rust he needs to shake off. So, I think you're going to have to give him like a week, at least a week or two before we really start to draw any conclusions. But I am interested to see, like, do they keep him here, on that line for now? Does he get a shot at second line right wing at some point? Do they put him at center at some point? Because I think his best preseason game came when he was centering a line with Frederick and Brazeau. But obviously, that was the third line center spot, and that's where Patra is now. Patra was hurt at the time, so that spot is not as open as it was then. So most likely he stays at right wing, and we'll see if it's just sticks on the third line. Does he develop chemistry with Patra and Frederick? Like, it's an intriguing combination. It's Patra and Johnson especially, like two smaller guys, but also guys who are quick, play with pace, have some offensive creativity. So that could work, or they could get outmuscled and overmatched, and you're like, oh crap, they need a bigger presence there.
Yeah. Just because Frederick's on that line, if you got two smaller guys, it doesn't necessarily help, even though Frederick's a bigger player, a tougher player. But and it brings us back to what happens to Morgan Geekie, because Geekie's the guy that's scratched. He had, I think, in the Seattle game, he had, and in the two wins, he had some flashes of being more like back to himself, possessing pucks, hustling. But then I still don't know if it's been good enough to have a spot in the lineup every day. And Johnson certainly creates that competition, and how much they rotate those guys in and out. I'm not sure, but I mean, Johnson obviously has a chance to win that job, win that spot, with every chance that he gets in the lineup. So I don't know if Geekie goes back in for the Bruins next game against Calgary. What do you guys think about Geeky's game and what this means for him?
I really, part of me is like, sure, throw him back in because no one's really playing, really so well that like their spot is secure in the lineup. I mean, obviously outside some of the key guys, but then the other part of me is like, can we just give some of these lines some leash and give them some leeway? Now I know Geeky was part of that third line during the 2-game win streak, and Tyler Johnson was part of it during the loss. So again, if you want to put him in specifically to your question, Bridget, like I guess you're not. In theory, it should be fine. I guess the Bruins just need to decide right now, like, let's give these lines some leeway here. Do we want to do Johnson or Geeky? And that's the $1 million question to your point.
Yeah, and honestly, like that's what kind of made this a little surprising to me is there have been weeks that have gone by where we're like, why aren't they signing Tyler Johnson? Like they clearly could use some sort of spark in that middle six. And then you finally sign him and make the change after the weekend where Jim Montgomery said, I liked our lines and feel like that was the best combinations and best chemistry we found this season. So you finally find something that you liked and thought was encouraging, and you change it for the next game. Like, just odd timing. It's like this move would have made sense literally any point in like the 3 weeks prior to now, and then doing it after those 2 games is like, all right, that's a little odd. Like the way you were talking made it sound like there weren't going to be any lineup changes, and now right away there is one.
Yeah, I don't think anything else was changed though. I think the rest of the roster was the same. Like Lohrei was scratched again. Same goalie and net. Defensive pairs were all the same. So really that was the only change was Johnson for Geeky. And obviously the Max Jones experience might be over. So yeah, I mean, those 2 guys, Riley Tufte and Max Jones, who were brought in the offseason to compete for a bottom 6 job, they just, in their opportunities, they weren't able to hold on to those jobs. I don't think any of us would say, it was unfair for those guys to have been waived after what they did when they were in Boston.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate for Max Jones. Like, obviously, he got injured. He missed a bunch of training camp in the preseason. I feel like a couple things. Like, you put him behind the 8 ball. It opened the door for Cole Koepke to basically steal the spot that I think is where they had Jones penciled in. And then once Jones came back, like, it was pretty clear he was just trying to do too much. And he was taking penalties. He was chasing hits. And it's like that probably doesn't happen if you have all of camp and you feel like you're on the same page and up to speed with everyone else. But when you're the guy playing catch up, like that's natural human instinct is like you just overdo it. And him overdoing it played himself out of the lineup, played himself out of more opportunities. And it was pretty, especially after the Johnson signing, like it was pretty clear he wasn't going to play right now. So there was they didn't have to waive him. Like cap space wise, they were okay. They could have held on to him, but I think they probably figured it's not going to do anyone any good for him to just sit around as the 14th forward going 2-3 weeks at a time without playing.
All right, so let's kind of round this back to some of their even strength play. I'm just looking at natural stat trick quickly while we're recording, so hopefully the information I'm giving is correct. But in 613 minutes of even strength time on ice, as a team, Boston is -1. 19 goals for, 20 against. Their 19 goals for is tied for 28th with Philadelphia. There's 4 teams beneath them in even strength goals for. And then Scott, to your earlier point, or all of our earlier points, but their special teams, they're 29th in the league on the power play and 20th in the league in the penalty kill. And I just mentioned their even strength numbers. So it just those bird's eye view numbers really are indicative of where this team is right now. And it's just a team that really outside of a couple of games recently against some lower teams, which, I mean, hey, I guess nothing's been given for the Bruins this year. It just hasn't been good. And you can't help but look at the lack of balanced scoring up and down the lineup. I mean, here we are 14 games into the year. And again, numbers, production doesn't always tell the whole story, but at a certain point, you have to produce. And Charlie Coyle, I know he had a pretty good weekend on and off the score sheet prior to the Toronto's game. But again, he's still sitting at just 2 points. No assists in 14 games. Pavel Zacha, 3 points through 14 games. I know he's snake bitten. I know he probably should have had a goal count against Seattle, but again, the numbers are what they are still. Trent Frederick, we expected 45 points from him this year, and he's sitting at 3 points in 14 games. So when you consider those factors, those elements, and the fact that Pastrnak is, he's leading the team in scoring, but as we talked about last episode, not scoring at his, expected rate. Lindholm and Marchand have been okay. It's just the entire lineup. And again, I'm not trying to sound all doom and gloom, because I do think I have to think it'll get better. But there's just no magic formula that's gonna make it all. They have to work their way out of this. And again, I think it's a combination of coaching and players' execution. But you look at their even strength numbers, their individual point production, their special teams numbers. The goaltending has been Jekyll and Hyde. So it's really tough to get a read on this team.
Yeah,
the 5-on-5, especially the 5-on-5 offensive numbers are really bad. Like it's not just that they're not scoring, like they're not getting chances. They're let's see, I've got it here. 27th in high danger chances at 5-on-5. Like I mentioned it on our last episode. Like they have actually done a decent job cleaning up defensively in terms of chances allowed. And I think Montgomery even mentioned that Tuesday night, that he feels like they've at least found some defensive structure. Again, separating 5-on-5 from penalty kill. Like 5-on-5, there's been improvement. Penalty kill, still bad. But the chances and like getting to inside and is just not there. Like they are just struggling mightily to do that. And that's the kind of thing where it's like there's no easy answer. Tyler Johnson is not going to single-handedly fix that. It's going to have to be guys working to get inside and to get chances at the net front, whether that's deflections, rebounds, getting more pucks to that area, holding on to pucks more in the offensive zone so that good chances open up. All the things they say they want to do, but simply have not been able to do this season.
Yeah, and I was hoping that I mean, we talked about this a lot last episode. Pastrnak getting benched. We were wondering how his response would be on the ice. Obviously, his response in person was, I got to be better. I'm not mad about it. So the right reaction off the ice, but on the ice, did you guys think he acted like a player that was trying to bounce back from something like that?
No, I didn't think he had a good game at all. Takes a bad offensive zone high sticking penalty. Now he does draw 2 penalties later in the game, and he draws them by driving towards the net, which is what you want to see. But it shouldn't have taken until desperation time for that to happen. Like that should have been the mindset that should have been the mindset that he and the rest of the team were playing with from the start. Instead, it took until he got down 2 or 3-0 before guys started playing that way.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't really, I wasn't encouraged by it, and it's a bold strategy by Montgomery to scratch Pastrnak last game. And this is it was the second time he outwardly just kind of criticized or disciplined, I should say, is the better word, one of his captain's leaders. Obviously, he did it to Marchand in Utah. and the team they didn't really respond in the following game. Can't say they really responded. So you discipline Marchand in Utah, and then you lose 5-0 in Nashville, and then you discipline Pastrnak in a winning effort against Seattle, then you lose 4-0 to Toronto. So Montgomery is definitely, I think he's kind of in a why not phase right now. He's in the final year of his contract. I think he's trying to go down swinging if he's going to go down, and I think he's trying to push all the buttons possible. Where it's problematic is if those buttons that are being pushed aren't paying dividends, and it's just I don't really know. I know we're supposed to be giving opinions here, but I don't. I don't think anybody's been doing a great job. I don't think the coaching staff has done a great job. I don't think the players are doing a great job. I don't want to let the players off the hook by firing the coach, but at the same time, maybe the coaching staff could use a shakeup. I don't really know what the proper course of action is here, because to say just give them time to find their way out of it. All right, this headphone piece just won't go in, guys. All right, fine. Like, we'll give them all the time to find their way out of it, I suppose. But right now, they are the second wild card team behind Washington. So I mean, believe it or not, they are in a playoff position at 6-7-1, but they're 18th in the NHL. I just think if they continue to slip and fall, and it's a month from now and not in the playoffs, or they're still hovering, anything's fair game.
Well, yeah, and it's especially disappointing. Like, your team goes as your leaders and best players go, and they have been as inconsistent as anyone, and that sets the tone for the team being inconsistent. Like, I don't think any of them played a good game on Tuesday night. And you look at the single biggest issue was how many penalties they took. Okay, they took 8 penalties. 5 of them were by your 3 captains, right? Like, 2 by McAvoy, 2 by Marchand. Now, one of Marchand's was a matching, or actually it ended up giving the Bruins a power play, which I thought they were kind of lucky to get, where he jumps in on Tanev after that hit on Pastrnak. And then 1 by Pastrnak. So, like, they're leading the way in terms of what your biggest problem in this game was. And instead of, again, like they all say the right things. They're doing a good job handling the media, right? I on our last episode praised everything Charlie McAvoy said post game Sunday about soul searching and guys looking internally for, what they can do to help the team and all that. But, like, all of a sudden it doesn't sound as impressive when you go out and do that the next game. I didn't think McAvoy was good. I didn't think either of the other captains was very good. Like, no one was good. So it just can't happen. Like, you got to be able to walk the walk. Like, and they're just not doing it. It's turning things around with 2 wins over bad teams is not really turning things around. Like, that's a good first step. And then you have to keep building, and instead they just fell on their face.
Yeah, and to just go back to the standings for a second, and the fact that they're still in the second wild card spot right now. And obviously we're just using this as a barometer to judge them against the other teams in the conference. If it was going by points percentage, they would be out of the wild card, either of the wild card spots, because
Good distinction.
they have a losing record. So they're 6-7-1, so their points percentage is below 500, and that obviously at the end of the season won't be good enough to get you into the playoffs. So if you play this way the rest of the season, you're not making the playoffs.
Right. So, I don't know where we want to go from here. I mean, Calgary's been playing good hockey, so like that's another challenging game here.
Yeah, one thing I did want to bring up. I don't know if you guys saw this, but Tuesday. This was like Tuesday afternoon. Kevin Weeks from ESPN just threw out a tweet saying that there's interest in Trent Frederick, and like teams have been checking on him basically. And his tweet was a little confusingly worded, because like I saw people who thought he just meant that there's going to be interest in him after the season because he's a free agent.
Yeah.
I read that as like there's trade interest now. Otherwise, I don't know why on earth like he would even tweet that. Like, why would you tweet? There's going to be interest in every free agent after the season. So I'm assuming he's talking about trade interest now. And I was curious, like, what, like, I don't know, is that an option? Should that be an option? Frederick's a pending unrestricted free agent, has not had a good start to the season. You know, if you get the right offer, like, do you trade him now or in the next month or whenever that offer comes in?
I would say, obviously depending on the return, he's on the table for sure. Like he's going to be a rental for someone because he's going to become a free agent at the end of the season, or maybe wherever he would go, they would extend him as soon as he got there. But I think all guys in the last year of their contract are guys that are on the table to get traded more so than other players. And Frederick would certainly fall into that category. And he does bring toughness. You have to think like a team that would be interested in him would probably be a playoff team. To add him, but I mean, I guess it doesn't have to be, but yeah, I don't see why he couldn't be available for a trade, because if you think about who else they have as an asset that other teams would want, like, or that would even be available, there's not a whole lot of options there.
Well, I'll say this, as it pertains to Bruins personnel, Trent Frederick is not somebody that comes to my mind where I'm like, oh yeah, I want to trade him. Like more than I'm not actively trying to trade Trent Frederick. I like him as a player. And I certainly like him as a player a lot when he's on his game. If it just, I need to see him more of this year because Scott, you mentioned in the past, he's a slow starter, but if he can turn things around quickly and become the player that he was for the Bruins last year and in a lot of parts the year before, where he's again, if Trent Frederick can be a 40 to 50 point player who's good defensively and willing to mix it up physically and stand up for teammates and spark his team, there's a place on him on every single hockey team, Boston included. I think there's an element to his game that that the Bruins should wanna retain. That said, when you talk about the numbers we're talking about, and I'm not trying to have any knee-jerk reactions a month into the season, but again, when you're looking at the lack of offensive generation, I'm not talking production, I'm talking offensive generation, at even strength and on the power play, and on the penalty killing penalties. Like their game is so pretty brutal all the way around. Like it's tough to really just be like, no, 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 no. I want to keep all of our play. No, no, no. Like they're not being good enough, and he's included in that. Now, the story being brought up by Kevin Weeks, Scott, that's a good point. I didn't really think too much into it. I thought maybe that's an agent looking at one of his clients get off to a slow start, and he's trying to put a plug out to just gauge interest in his player. I don't know. Maybe trying to do his job as an agent, like he's struggling, but maybe trying to boost his. But again, he's a UFA. The market will dictate what somebody's worth in the UFA status. So if they are looking to shop him, part of me is like, all right, what's the return? But he's not one of the players I'm trying to shoot away from this team. There's other players that trade geeky or honestly yeah, I don't know. I don't want to talk trade stuff right now because I'll just sound like an asshole. But I'm not actively trying to trade Trent Frederick.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and also
but I would listen. I would listen.
You're giving up some things that you would need for the playoffs as well. Like if you really think this team is built for the playoffs, like he's one of the guys that you would want to keep on your team. Your middle six already has its issues. And what you would need to get back from a trade, like what the Bruins actually need to add to their roster, I don't know if you get that back. Like I don't know if that's the value you get back in a Frederick trade, because you're looking probably for a second line guy. Trading a third line guy, like there'd be probably some sort of package in order that you'd have to put together in order to get an upgrade and try to grab someone for the second line, and then I guess Geeky's your guy on the third line in that situation with Patra and Johnson, or something like that. But yeah, I think just because of the fact that he's going to be a free agent, always brings your name to be talked about for trades. I mean, we saw it with DeBrusque too. When guys come to the end of their contract, they get to that rental territory where teams are looking to grab them for, the playoff run.
Yeah, I think like everything you guys have laid out as far as, Trent Frederick has these qualities that you want and other teams would want and you'd want in the playoffs. And it's like, yeah, you're right. If he's actually bringing all that, which he hasn't so far. Like sticking up for Patra over the weekend was nice. Like that's a start, but he hasn't really been effective on the forecheck. He hasn't been all that physical all that often this season. He hasn't created scoring chances. He hasn't been on the receiving end of scoring chances. Like I don't think he's been very good defensively, which has been a strength in the past. So it's like, if you're the Bruins, there's a few things you have to figure out. Is like, is he going to turn it around? Is he going to help you turn it around? Is he part of your longer term future? Like, do you plan to try to re-sign him? And if the answer to any or all of those is no, then like, of course you're open to trade. Like, you got to be open to anything. And if the right offer comes along, sure, I would take it. Like, but it's also the kind of like shake up where it would be something like a little lesser than firing the coach or moving like a true core piece. Like Trent Frederick's sort of that next level down shake up where it's like he is loved in that room. Like he is very popular among his teammates. It would absolutely grab guys' attention if he got traded. So there's that element as well.
Yeah, him and Charlie Coyle are like, they act like they're big brother, little brother all the time. They're always together.
I mean, grabs their attention, great. But then next game, your third line is still Morgan Geeky, Tyler Johnson, and Matt Patra or whatever. Like, so okay, like there's attention grabbing, and that can have like short-term effects for a game. But if we're talking long-term, I just don't really see like how. Again, return is everything, and I understand the concept of getting something for a pending UFA if you don't plan on re-signing them long term. So those are factors. But if we're talking like message sending, it's like, I just don't. I don't think the reward is as fruitful as the long term risk, because I just don't think you trade him and then Coyle wakes up for the rest of the season. Like I just don't see it. Like it's just, but it's an interesting conversation. I did have a question for you guys on something else that was reported recently that was shot down due to a Scott question, but we never really touched on this element of the Brad Marchand rumor that he and the Bruins were close on a 3-year contract. My question is this: if there's any smoke to that fire, and the Bruins are in talks with Brad Marchand for a 3-year deal, how do you guys feel about the term there? I mean, I was expecting like maybe like a Bergeron 1 year at a time type thing.
Yeah, I guess it depends on the money. Like if he's trading annual salary for longer term, like, hey, I just don't have to worry about that year to year, and it's 3 years, like $3 million or less a year, then I'm fine with it, because even with a slower start to this season, like I think Marchand's still going to be worth that. But if we're talking like 3 years and he still wants, 5 million plus, that I wouldn't be comfortable with, because like I don't know if he's going to hold up as that kind of player. Obviously, we've already seen signs of him physically wearing down. He's had a lot of injuries and a lot of surgeries in recent years, and that's not generally a recipe for sustained high level play into your late 30s or 40 years old.
Yeah, because he would be 39 at the start of that last year of the deal. So, and then he could be 40 if they go on a playoff run. Like he would turn 40 in the playoffs of of a third year, of that third year contract extension. But yeah, I guess it all depends on the money, like Scott said, because obviously the need to keep his cap hit down is probably greater than, maybe getting the term to be shorter. So that because guys in the past have taken team friendly deals. Bergeron and Krejci both have done it in the past. Like there's been so many examples of team friendly deals that captains and veterans have taken with Boston that it kind of feels like that's what we're maybe looking at if he wants that 3-year contract to take more than what Bergeron took at the end there, but still, it's interesting that went away, right? Like 'cause Brian brought it up, but I almost forgot about it already. Like it wasn't in the front of my mind, which it was in the front of everyone's mind when they heard it. But then with Marchand shooting it down, and then it not coming to fruition in the next week, or how long ago was it? I forget even now how long ago this rumor came up, but.
Yeah, I think it was. I forget, but I mean, it was probably a matter of weeks ago. But and then just one other comment, guys, before we leave here. Just some more bird's eye view rankings. We talked about Boston's even strength rankings, their special teams rankings, their goaltending rankings. Let's talk about that because they did just come off of back-to-back shutouts, which is obviously interesting considering the numbers I'm about to say. But they are 22nd in the league in goals against per game as a tandem. 3.29 goals per game as a team. Now, forgive me for my ignorance, but I would hope that they would take out empty netters when calculating that, because obviously but could be wrong.
It depends what stat you're looking at. Like individual goalie stats, that's taken out. Team goals against, it's included.
Okay. But the save percentage, we can definitely assume is they're tied for 23rd in the league with Pittsburgh in team save percentage at 894. So again, when you add up all these very telling important team statistics, there's no surprise, but like they are where they are. And again, it's like they're everywhere you look, they're struggling. How does that just turn around all of a sudden? Where do you start? Does it start with a solid full 60 and just build some confidence against a good team? A full 60 against a good team and get some confidence going? Does it start from just Charlie Cole having a 3-goal night or a 3-point night, or Pastrnak having a 5-point night and just like confidence going? Or that's why the Seattle game kind of sucked that the Zacha goal didn't count, because I really did think that was going to be a stat night for everybody. The tenor of that game changed with that goal being called off. But guys, when the team's just struggling in every category, what's the best recipe to get out of it?
It's work. And they've said this, like they know it. They just aren't doing it consistently. It's hard work. It's just showing up and working your ass off every day to get a little bit better. And if this team does that, they are, or they should be, at least a top half of the NHL team. Again, like whether this team has any chance of getting to like Stanley Cup contender status, I honestly don't even care about right now. Like that's so far off. Don't even worry about it. That's like 12 steps down the road. Just worry about working hard and getting a little better and improving. Like they can do that and they can go win some games, pick up points, get themselves back inside the playoff picture. Like that should be within grasp. That should be doable. But until they do that consistently, they're going to continue to be a very inconsistent up and down team. And on the goaltending, like I've been saying for a while, I don't think it's been good enough. It's not. I don't think it's their biggest issue. I don't think they're getting enough help in front of them. But I keep hearing, and like especially after the 2 shots over the weekend, it's like, especially on radio, I've heard a lot of like goaltending's been good, like they're not the problem, and I'm like, well, they're kind of part of the problem. Like, I'm not on board with like just totally letting them off the hook. Like I don't, I don't think that's right. Like again, you can be part of the problem without being the biggest part of the problem.
Yeah, I mean the numbers don't really lie in that aspect, like Brian was just reading. And when you look at a guy like Stolarz last night and some of the saves he was able to make, and there were some of them that he made that you're not expected to save. Like he was stealing some, and we just haven't really seen that. I think that's the big difference is getting the saves that are the high danger chances, the ones that are hard to stop, that elite goalies stop, but other guys don't. We just haven't seen that a high number of those saves this season. I would argue that I think maybe the one that comes to mind was actually a Korpisalo save for probably the best like high danger save of the season so far. But obviously, you're paying Swayman to be an elite goalie, and so that the contract comes with the pressure to perform like that.
All right. Well,
just for the heck of it, because I've been checking in on this occasionally. Just their international stat trick. Goalies who have played 200 minutes, so that's a little over three games. 49 goalies have played at least 200 minutes this season. Jeremy Swayman is 38th in high danger save percentage.
Did you say 49 or 39 total?
He is 38th out of 49.
49.
Right, as in, yeah, he's not bailing his team out more than the rest of the goalies, correct? Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, mm-hmm. and that's a stat that last year the Bruins, Swayman and Allmark combined were like elite in, correct?
We're always very good in.
So yeah, it's everything, and that's why it's how do I know we're trying to get out of here because we have to go, but I just don't understand how a team that returns so many core players can be so different. Like if a team has major turnover, that's one thing. Like this Bruins team has a culture and a core that's been around for a long time. That you can't help you really can't help but wonder like just the bad juju around his teams back in the off season with all the distractions of the Swayman negotiations and being asked about that throughout training camp, and just the bad blood between the player and the camp and the management camp during the summer, and then like just the clear disconnect between the players and the coaching staff. And again, I think a lot of it's philosophical. I think a lot of it's a lack of effort by the players and execution. But it does seem like it's not so much that people are like tuning out the coaching staff, but they're just not on the same page. And I find that inexcusable, really, because there's so much carryover and stability in the coaching staff and the core players for this to be the case. It really is baffling to me, guys, and it's not. It's Scott. You mentioned hard work is the formula. I totally agree, but I don't know. I don't know. I'm at a loss for words for the first time in this podcast. I really just don't know where this team goes from here because it all is just not great and far too inconsistent to be generous.
Yeah. Well, the next two games are Calgary and Ottawa. They're both at home. They need to play more like they did against Seattle than the way that they did against Toronto. And that starts first and foremost with not taking as many penalties. That would first of all make for a much better watch because it is frustrating to watch hockey played like that. And that it also slows your confidence. It affects the game in a lot of ways. So that for sure has to get fixed. We keep saying it, obviously. We just keep saying it over and over again. Oh, it has to get fixed, and then doesn't seem to get fixed. But at the very least, the reaction to what happened against Toronto should be disciplined against Calgary and Ottawa.
Yeah, it's should be a friendly schedule. Like here, it's a great opportunity to bounce back because you're facing teams that aren't very good. Like Calgary has kind of crashed back to earth after a hot start. Ottawa is ahead of you in the standings, but has been kind of the definition of mediocre so far. And then even St. Louis on the road after that, like they have not been a very good team. So
do you think we get a pregame goalie hug when they play against Ottawa? No more goalie hugs.
I think they'll catch up in the hallway after the game, and that'll probably be it.
All right, well, you gotta get out of here so Scott can get to his 11:30. Again, next episode, mailbag, tweet the Skate Pod, comment here on YouTube, tweet at the three of us individually, email skatepod@weei.com. We'll compile and again condense and try to answer as many as possible on Friday. So thank you all very much for listening. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, and we'll talk to you soon. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.